So, welcome to our final open forum of Vice President for Research Candidates. After this forum, all of the tapes of everybody's open forum will be posted online, and that will be sent out to the faculty. And I want to remind you that you are able to fill out a feedback on vprsearch.unm.edu. So our final candidate today is Dr. Robert Peterkin. He has a PhD from the University of North Carolina in physics. He is currently the Chief Scientist of Directed Energy at Air Force Research Labs, where they have $330 million budget. And just before that, he was a Vice President at SAIC. So I welcome Robert Peterkin.
All right, well, thank you, Dean Coonrod, Mr. Gallegos, for arranging all of this. And thank you all for turning out on a yet another beautiful New Mexico day and coming to this forum. I greatly appreciate it. So I'm Robert Peterkin, and I'm a physicist. How many of you are physicists? Wrong. Already we're getting off on the wrong foot. I beg to differ. Every one of us comes into this world as really a physicist. So from our earliest days, as we learn how to crawl and walk and balance ourselves and play catch, we learn physics, and we learn it through experience, and we learn it empirically, and we have an appreciation for physics from our earliest days. So despite my early training in physics, when I got to high school, I wanted to be a biologist. And one of the reasons is I had a great biology teacher, a fabulous biology teacher in elementary school in 7th grade. So I wanted to be a biologist. And then I got to my senior year in high school and took a physics class where I learned the mathematics behind what I had already learned intuitively. And my physics teacher was a Jesuit from Eastern Europe. And he was a great teacher. And in the middle of the class, decided that we were in an honors class and thought that he had to teach us the rudiments of relativity. So it's unusual to learn relativity, at that time it was unusual to learn relativity in high school. Nevertheless, he decided to teach us relativity. And he got started by holding up a meter stick. And then he invited us all to get up, and there aren't that many of us in the class, and walk past the meter stick. And then we sat down and he said, okay, how big is the meter stick? How long is that meter stick? Well, we were in honors class, so we thought, well, a meter, but of course that would probably not, I mean, this was an honors class in physics, right? So we'd have to probably think a little bit more deeply than a meter. So somebody raised their hand and said, 39.9 inches? You're supposed to giggle. Okay. Maybe it was more subtle. Maybe, you know, he asked us to walk past it. Maybe we were supposed to inspect the ends and notice that it was maybe not a precise machine, so maybe it had worn off a little bit. Maybe it was a little bit shorter than a meter and what have you. So we all, you know, threw out answers like that. And he said, well, you're all right, because the length, in fact, is not well defined. It really depends on your point of view. It depends on your reference frame, which is the fundamental tenet behind relativity. So that was delightful, but then, you know, after the class I said, all right, I get that, you know, then he started teaching us the math, the arithmetic behind special relativity. I said, I get that, but it's really a meter, isn't it? Sorry. I tend to want to walk around, so I hope you don't mind, and I hope you all don't mind. So I said, it's really a meter, right? And he said, no. In physics, there is no really. It really depends on your point of view, and that's the fundamentals of special relativity, and that's what hooked me. That's why I wanted to become, even though I was a child physicist, I wanted then to become a professional physicist. And of course, then I went to college, at Boston College, where I majored in physics and started learning quantum mechanics, and then I learned about Young was a scientist from the early 1800s who did a famous double slit experiment with light waves. And that's when his experiments proved unequivocally that light is a wave by looking at the interference pattern between light going through a couple of slits. And that was wonderful. And then about 80 years later, people started to discover something called the photoelectric effect. And I was learning about the photoelectric effect. And then Einstein, the guy who gave us special relativity, then told us back in 1905, I think it was, that the photoelectric effect can be described by defining light not as a wave, but as a particle. And so I learned this as an undergrad, and I said, great. And then I went up to my teacher afterwards, and I said, of course, but what is it really? Is it really a wave? Is light really a wave, or is it a particle? And my teacher said, well, there is no really. And then I remembered, oh yeah, that's what my high school teacher said. So then I was really hooked, and I decided to get my PhD in physics. So that's a little bit about my background, about what motivated me to be a physicist. So fast forward a few years, I got my PhD from the University of North Carolina in quantum gravity, of all things. And I was looking at getting a postdoc, and I had a few offers, one in Canada, a couple in Virginia. And then I got an offer to actually join a small company here in Albuquerque that was a bunch of astrophysicists who were doing basic applied research in support of some dense plasma experiments going on up at Los Alamos. So I actually took that job and moved to New Mexico right after my PhD. And my family and I have been living in New Mexico ever since. Got 2 kids who actually graduated from here. 1 kid graduated from another school, but she's taking some classes here. I have a wife who works up at the Health Sciences Center. So we're really New Mexicans and a New Mexico family. I've had a bunch of jobs back east and elsewhere. I won't bore you with all those details. They're in my bio, which is online. You can find out if you really care. So I've had a lot of different jobs, but right now I'm working at a place called the Air Force Research Lab. So if I didn't displace my clicker here. Air Force Research Lab. I'm not going to tell you a lot about the Air Force Research Lab, except that it's a really big place. The Air Force has one comprehensive laboratory that does all of the Air Force's basic, applied, and demonstration work. It's geographically distributed. It's headquartered in Ohio, of all places. We have a presence in Washington, which is where the basic research part of my lab is. It's called AFOSR, Air Force Office of Scientific Research. We're broken up into technology directorates. 2 of them are here in Albuquerque, space vehicles and directed energy. And the 2 directorates here in Albuquerque work very closely together and work a lot with UNM. And I'm the chief scientist for directed energy, but I've been doing this gig for about 5 years. So the outline of my talk, of course, is first me, then you, and then where we can go together. So now I'm moving on to the you part. So I've looked at University of New Mexico from afar for a long time. And when I became interested in being your next vice president for research, I did a little bit of homework. So I want to tell you some of the things I've learned about your university. None of this will be news to you, but this is to show you that I've actually done some homework, and this is what I think about UNM. Based on my experiences, UNM has a lot of strengths, and I don't only have a little bit of time with you, so I'm going to reduce my perception of UNM strengths to a mere 1 slide. So first of all, we have a mission, and that's good. So the mission includes, we call ourselves the flagship university of the state. I think that's very important. So that's a strength of us. We have a diverse, talented, highly motivated faculty. It goes without saying, but it needs to be said. A broad spectrum. I met with the deans at lunchtime, and it was a wonderful exchange. We have a broad spectrum of excellent schools and colleges and research centers. There are 15 colleges or schools and 3 large centers in this university, including the Health Sciences Center. That's comprehensive and exciting. We have an ethnically diverse faculty, staff, and state. One of our strengths is we are, in fact, a Hispanic-serving institution. Many of our undergraduates and many of our graduate students are Hispanics, a strength to continue to leverage. One of the things that UNM has done relatively recently is establish something called Innovate ABQ, and the STC organization. I think these are extremely innovative concepts. I look forward to leveraging those things. EPSCoR, it's an NSF-funded opportunity for, in some sense, underrepresented states, including New Mexico, to get its fair share of basic research dollars for interesting topics from the National Science Foundation. We are surrounded by federal laboratories, a huge strength that we are leveraging, and I believe we can leverage even greater going forward. We have unique arts and history in the state, one of the great attractions of the state, one of the things that brought a lot of us to this state if we didn't have the good fortune of being born here in the first place. And we have a plan, the UNM strategic plan. I love this plan. I'm sure you've all seen it, seven elements, and I'll have more to say about this plan in a few minutes. Now, we spend a lot of money, well, sorry. Okay, here we go. So we are a research university. So I looked this up online. Here are the 15 schools. Here's the research budget, more or less, from a couple of years ago. And I'm sure it's essentially the same now. And this includes, by the way, $140-something million in the Health Sciences Center. So comprehensive research university with a very healthy research budget. Some facts about UNM. I'm not going to read all of it, but we got a nice campus, about 30,000 students, award 5,000 degrees every year, have a lot of employees, almost 1,100 tenure and tenure-track faculty, a tuition that is actually pretty low, $6,000 a year or so for undergrads. When I sent to my kids here, I really appreciated that. And Los Alamos, Sandia, and surrounded by federal laboratories. And here's a list of colleges and schools. I'm going to show another slide for another university down the road a little bit, and I'm going to want to belabor that one a little bit to contrast it to our university. Of that $324 million, including the $148 million in Health Sciences Center, here's where it comes from. 70% comes from federal agencies. That's relevant for at least two reasons, one of which is, in the little bit of research I've done, that's a typical number. Many research universities draw on the order of 70% of their research dollars from the feds. The other reasons it's important to me is because I, right now, am a Fed. I know a lot about the way the feds invest, and I know a lot about their shifting priorities. And that's something going forward we can leverage, and I'll have more to say about that in a minute. All right, so the third part of my talk, where do we go from here? What's my vision for the role for your next VPR? I'm sorry, maybe I should have stayed behind the podium. Okay, sorry I'm walking around so much. All right, from UNM's perspective, here is a list of what UNM considers its peer institutions. Have you all seen this? Okay. Frankly, I don't know where this list came from. But it's not an unreasonable list. We could quibble with, somebody's missing or somebody maybe ought not to be here, but this is what UNM thinks of as its peer institutions. I think there's 22 of them. So I did a deep analysis of all 22 peer institutions. But I only have time to talk about one, and I'm going to talk about the University of Colorado at Boulder. Why am I going to focus on that one? Well, like University of New Mexico, we're in the Rocky Mountains. Okay. The other two schools, typically, there was actually one from Florida. Don't know why that's a peer, but we were surrounded, the surrounding states, but the only one in the Rocky Mountains really is the University of Colorado at Boulder. Plus, I had a kid who started off their college career at UC Boulder, so I actually know something about that college from a parent's point of view. And he had the good sense to transfer from UC Boulder to CU Boulder to UNM after his first year. So I want to talk a little bit about Boulder. So their research budget is comparable to UNM's, $351 million a year. And I want to draw your attention to the facts, because these facts are similar in some respects to UNM. Size of the campus, number of students. You remember UNM 29, 32, so comparable. They award more degrees. I don't know why, but they do award more degrees per year. Same number of tenure track and tenured faculty, essentially. Tuition, actually quite a bit higher. In-state tuition. Now, I can tell you, out-of-state tuition is a lot higher than that. And if you look at what the University of Colorado thinks about its challenges, one of them is too low of a in-state tuition. They wish it were higher. And they're already $4,000 a year higher than UNM. Their endowment, $431 million. It's actually a pretty small endowment. It's a little bit bigger than UNM's. Both UNM and Colorado would probably benefit from larger endowments. Some other major research universities have much bigger endowments. Colorado, surrounded by federal labs. Different kind of federal labs. NIST, NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, one of my favorite labs. NOAA, NCAR, similar to UNM. They, unlike UNM, they have 11 colleges and schools. They have no health sciences center. So again, excluding the health sciences center, comparable number of schools, comparable size campus, although the numbers for UNM include the faculty at the health sciences center, so maybe slightly bigger school. But these research dollars, comparable to UNM's, don't include the health science center. So the research dollars going to non-health sciences is actually a lot more up in Boulder. So it's an interesting comparison, I think, UNM to Boulder. Peer institutions, yes. I want to point out that since 1967, UC Boulder has been a member of the Association of American Universities. So Boulder's a good school. UNM's a good school. Peer institutions, they have some advantages over UNM. We have some room to grow, I think. And part of my vision of being your next VPR is to help that growth. Can I be more specific? Well, sure. How can we work together to make UNM even a better university? I love UNM's 2020 vision. So of the 7 goals, number 6 resonates: advanced discovery and innovation. Important for us to do. And by the way, maintain what we have. We have a lot to build upon. What we have includes a list of outstanding research areas. So the areas that UNM, that the present Office of VPR, good to see you, sir, from his website, research areas of national standing are listed here. So this is what UNM right now views as its strengths. Comprehensive, perhaps not, but it is what we view as our strengths. A lot to leverage on, and we have to maintain and strengthen this. Our way forward, Office of VPR, build upon what's been done already to help our excellent faculty identify and pursue opportunities aligned with shifting federal priorities. A lot of people will tell you that the federal budget is flat, and that's true, and that the opportunity for growth is not there. I believe that not to be true. The federal funding for research may be flat, but areas of opportunity are shifting. And getting in front of that, understanding, not reacting to the shifts once they're published and on the internet and the whole world knows about them, but anticipating or having knowledge, which frankly I bring to this community, having knowledge of where the various departments, my expertise is in the Department of Defense, but we can expand upon that as we work together. Looking for those new opportunities in the shifting areas will be key for the Office of the VPR to help the faculty do their jobs, their research jobs, even better. I think there's already excellent work going on creating cross-disciplinary teams. I heard a lot about that when I met with the deans this morning. It was a very exciting discussion. I think we can do more. Mentoring, I'm a big fan of mentoring. I'm sure we have at UNM a mentoring program for our junior faculty. My laboratory is not that dissimilar from a research university's faculty in the following way. I attract staff. Our teaching load is a lot lower compared to universities, but they're research staff. And we bring them into an environment, a complex bureaucracy. They've come out of graduate school. Perhaps they have some postdoc experience. They need to be mentored. They need to be taught how to do safe research in a very comprehensive laboratory that I run over at Kirtland Air Force Base. They need to be taught how to write winning proposals. Anybody can write a proposal, right? Writing winning proposals is an art. We have some very good proposal writers that we mentor our young staff to do. I would like to bring that, and I'm sure there's a mentoring program at UNM. You'll have to forgive me, I'm not familiar with the details, but it's really important to me to mentor junior faculty, and I bet you we can do it even better. I told you about goal number 2 of the UNM 2020 strategic plan. Goal number 1, become a destination university. I think this is really important because I saw, and many of you saw in the newspaper today, that the the enrollment numbers for UNM are actually on a downward trend. That's got to be of some concern, especially since the state and the Board of Regents are pretty much capping our tuition. We have to come to terms with that and maybe do more, work together more effectively to make this a destination university, not just from the best scholars in our state, but from outside of New Mexico as well. Goal 7 is a very interesting one, using the university to advance and accelerate economic development. So I'm a big fan of the concept of Innovate ABQ. I really want to learn more about Innovate ABQ, and I think it's an exciting idea, and we'll have to see how we execute on that. But this is an opportunity for the university not just to transition technology and start companies, but to improve the economic lot of the state, which I think is absolutely critical for us to do. A better state, a state with better economic health will, well, it's good for all of us because we live here, and it's good for the university as well. All right, I'm just going to flash a couple of slides on some very superficial, frankly, on some emerging federal trends. So many of you know this. The big funder out there is NIH. So in the president's budget for FY15, this is the budget, north of $30 billion for NIH. Universities tap into National Science Foundation. That budget, has been fluctuating generally, I think, on an upward turn, although it becomes a little bit political and sometimes the budget goes down. Anyway, $7 billion for NSF. I have some friends at NSF. I have no contacts at NIH. I'm looking forward to meeting some people from NIH. I think some of the skills I've developed in the Department of Defense can translate into helping us at NIH, but I will need help there. The Department of Defense I know very well. Department of Defense has got a huge budget for what they call R&D. $64 billion. And that number is actually going down a little bit. There's a little bit of an uptick, a 0.5% uptick this year. Much of that money, of course, is not for what we at a university would call research. The true research component of the $64 billion is run by an office called ASDR&E, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering. It's got an $11.5 billion budget. So that budget is actually healthy. It's not growing, but it's not really shrinking. And the focus areas, though, are moving. And that's, again, like I said earlier, an opportunity to get in front of that. So here's the guy who runs the most interesting part of the Pentagon. He's the number 3 guy in the Pentagon, Frank Kendall. He's the Undersecretary of Defense for Acquisition, Technology, and Logistics. In other words, he runs the logistics centers, the laboratories, and he buys everything for the Department of Defense. I actually briefed him just 2 weeks ago in Washington on some of the directed energy and space stuff that we've been doing. Very good guy, very interesting guy. And here's a couple of quotes from him. He says that there is concern about, in the Department of Defense, about eroding technological superiority. And this, but the quote that I really kind of like is, he says, we're in a cyclical downturn right now. So again, overall, by downturn, it means not growing. Things are flat, but inflation's there, so maybe for all intents and purposes, it's a little bit of a downturn. But the people who are prepared with products, he's an acquisition guy, but that includes research, products that we need, or who have done the technology to build the products that we will need, will be in much better position when things turn around, because this is cyclical. Office of Management and Budget and Office of Science and Technology Policy, that's the White House, Chief Scientist Office, have some priorities, and they resulted in some passbacks to the department in key areas. I just want to highlight a couple of them. DARPA, everybody's heard of DARPA, Defense Advanced Projects, Research Projects Agency, rather, develops new capabilities. They have a nice, very healthy budget. I'm not convinced that UNM is tapping into DARPA's budget as much as it could. So almost a $3 billion budget. Basic research of that $11.5 billion, basic research is $2 billion. That goes mostly to universities, okay? I don't think UNM gets its fair share of that. The next one is kind of a small number here, 90 million. I'd like to have 90 million, it's not that small. $90 million, but that's for the president's manufacturing initiative Innovative Manufacturing Initiative. And that's something UNM is already on top of. So UNM has proposed, and I understand is a finalist for a photonics and optics IMI. And that is great. And good luck. So I think UNM is got a set of universities associated with it, probably led by USC. Is that right? Okay. So I think that's a great opportunity. That leverages, by the way, one of the real strengths of this university is optics and photonics, something that's important to the state. Sandia, my lab are big into optics and photonics. So this is very exciting opportunities that we need to win this one. High performance computing. I included this because that's what my background is. I'm actually a fellow of the American Physical Society for my contributions doing basic research in advanced numerical algorithms for plasma physics. So high performance computing, the Army runs something for the department. Some people from UNM know that UNM used to run one of the 5 computing centers, the one out in Maui of all places. So they are a stable entity. UNM has expertise in high performance computing, and we ought to continue to leverage that into next generation about high performance computing, including quantum computing. So lots of legacy work done here that could be funded by this organization that might have a basic research component. Just for completeness, the way the Department of Defense works, it has budget authorities, what we call 6.1, 6.2, 6.3. 6.1 is the basic research component that the universities really tap into. So in red is the 6.1 component of the services and the big agencies. So, you know, Army, Navy, Air Force all have north of $400 million in basic research that we can be tapping into. The agencies actually do have components, including Defense Threat Reduction Agency. We talked about a little bit this morning. So there's 6.1 to be tapped into, and 6.2, even bigger chunks that I think the universities and the research laboratories can partnership on to do our jobs. All right, so wrapping up, last slide before questions. The youngsters in the group won't remember this book, but 25 years ago, this is a book published by a guy named Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So I read it, and it was an important book in my sort of growth as a human being, and I actually have taken those 7 habits to heart. Now, if I had more time, I'd talk about all 7 of them, but I'm just going to mention 3. Begin with the end in mind. So when we start any endeavor, think about where you're going. Somebody once said, if you don't have a map, any place you go will get you there. But, you know, so we need a map. We need to understand where we need to be. Begin with the end in mind. Second habit, and this is the most important one of all for me, seek first to understand, then be understood. So when I'm your next VPR, I'll come in with all kinds of visions, but I'm certainly not going to be a bull in a china shop and tell everybody how to do their jobs. I will spend a lot of time, you know, working with the deans and the faculty and the staff, learning what you guys do, you guys and gals do, and then figuring out the way forward based on that learning, and synergize. Okay, our desire to do multidisciplinary work is a very good idea. We learn so much when we synergize, when we take advantage of different resources and different opportunities, and we look to do research between the seams of the stovepipes of academic disciplines. Very exciting, and something that I've taken to heart. So my final little paragraph here is I've given some thought into my, no kidding, first actions as UNM's VPR. What would they be? So first of all, got to figure out where we're going. Reach a consensus with senior leadership of the university on what we aspire to be as a research university. We are a research university. Do we want to maintain the status quo? We don't want to lose it. Do we want to maintain it? Do we want to take it to the next level? We need to agree where we want to go. So that's where we start. Certainly meet with Mike and the OPR, the Office of VPR staff, to learn the ropes. I've not been working in an office for the Vice President of Research, although a lot of what I've done in my career, and certainly I'm doing now, is absolutely, I think, synergistic with what the OVPR does. But I would learn from the pros. I'm going to spend a lot of time learning about this university, so I will meet with the deans and the faculty to, I'm not brilliant, but I'm actually smart enough, I think I can learn. I've been proven myself, I've proven other people that I am trainable. So I will get out there and learn what we do at our university. Job one, do no harm. Don't screw up what we already have, and what we have is really impressive. So ensure the health of the present research enterprise. Then I'm going to start giving back, okay? Having understood, I'm going to start looking to synergize, use my knowledge of shifting federal priorities to inform UNM's staff, research staff, so that we can direct. Seek ways to strengthen ties. This is an obvious one. I'm not implying that we at UNM have no ties with the federal labs. They are, it's a mixed bag, frankly. We've been talking about this for decades. We have something to start from. I think it can, I'm sure it can be taken to the next level. I think I can help you do that. Develop a plan to establish a culture of creative cooperation. There's, in some parts of universities, and again, I've spent a good fraction of my career not working, not being employed at a university, but dealing with universities, recruiting staff, collaborating, et cetera, and so forth. There are pockets of universities where people want to be, individual lone researchers, and that's okay. But if everybody's like that, we won't get anywhere. We won't bring it to the next level. So I'm going to really look to establish a stronger culture of creative cooperation across the departments, dare I say, perhaps even with the Health Sciences Center. And with that, thanks for your attention, and I think we can open it up for questions.
So please introduce yourself as you come up to the microphone to ask questions. We want to make sure the questions are caught on the tape.
I can't believe this is a quiet bunch.
Welcome, Dr. Peterkin. I'm David Scott, Associate Dean for Research in the College of Education.
Pleasure to meet you.
Enjoyed all your comments. Certainly early on in your presentation, you mentioned the influence and impact that K-12 education had on you, and specifically a physics teacher, and moving your career forward. Talking about the culture of creative cooperation, I'd like to hear just a little bit about how you see that the VPR might work with the College of Education, as well as arts and sciences, engineering, and others, in helping us better prepare, especially STEM educators in K-12 for the future.
Okay, great question. So I already do some of that, actually. So at my part of AFRL, we actually have a pretty healthy K-12 STEM education outreach. We invite teachers, elementary and high school teachers and students, to come onto my campus to, we invite the teachers to learn science better. We don't try to teach teachers how to be teachers, but we do try to teach them how to understand science and how to make science exciting to their students. And then we bring students on board to do demonstration projects. We have a Mission to Mars project where we get the kids involved in actually building geodesic structures and having the kids think through the ramifications of there being lower gravity or no oxygen or solar radiation that's beyond the visible spectrum that they have to protect themselves up through, and they get very excited about doing that. And I have my staff actually help train, educate, and get the kids excited about these kind of activities. So that's just an example of what we already do at the K through 12 level. By the way, when I'm talking about this, I might as well also say that we have a very robust summer scholar program where we bring in a few high school kids, a lot of undergrads, and some graduate students to do summer research with my laboratory. And kids come from all over the country for that, and including a lot from New Mexico and a lot of undergrads and graduates from UNM. And then last but not least, I have a very robust NRC, National Research Council, postdoc program where we bring in PhDs into the lab because I want to hire them, right? So we bring them in as postdocs first. So I think it's, needless to say, education is critical, and in this state especially, we have some challenges. We have students who come from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. I myself actually came from an economically disadvantaged background. I was the first person in my family to go away to college. So but these teachers can be absolutely transformative. And getting, producing, so our university producing teachers who are enthusiastic and knowledgeable and know how to teach the arts, the humanities, and the sciences is absolutely critical. I think that we can team, right? So I don't know the details of the interaction between this College of Education and the College of Arts and Sciences and Engineering School. I hope there are synergies. I'd like to understand what's already being done, and then we would build on it. So that's my attempt to answer that very good question.
Ravi Jain, Electrical Engineering.
Sir, good to see you.
Nice to see you. You mentioned some specific large pools of money, such as DARPA and DoD. I was wondering if there are any specific actions that the VPR could take, or we as an institution could take to increase our presence. Clearly, all of us try to excel and target specific programs. Are there any organized activities that UNM could participate as a group or as an entity that improves our chances?
Okay. There's two things to do. One is we absolutely have to make sure we're aware of all the existing opportunities. I'm sure that Mike and his staff already do that. I'm not sure if we tap into, for example, I just don't know, if the congressional offices. I mentioned my wife who works at the Health Sciences Center. Once upon a time, she was a congressional staffer for Jeff Bingaman. So she told me this. The congressional offices are informed about all of these grant opportunities, right? So we have to make sure that we have knowledge of that. So one way to do it is to ensure that the Vice President's office has all of that information and makes it accessible, easily accessible to all of our PIs. Okay, so that's step one. Step two is, my vision for the Office of the VPR is, there's actually, to make it, there's lots of aspects of it, but to keep it simple, there's two aspects. One is internally focused, make sure the machinery of the office is working, make sure grants are done in a compliant manner, and that in transparency and fairness, people are aware of opportunities to keep the machinery of the office going. The other part of it is to be outwardly facing. So we need the resources to be able to travel up to the state legislature to educate them, to Washington to keep our ears open, and maybe even to help inform the directions that the shifting research priorities should go or are going, to get, in some sense, advance notice. One has to be proactive in these matters. That's what I do right now, by the way. I spend most of my time in Houston because that's the stopping off point to go to Washington, because in Washington, that's where the money is, that's where the priorities are set. There's a few other things we could do. Once upon a time, I was a member of something called the Air Force Scientific Advisory Board. This is a board that advises the Air Force. And by the way, the other services have similar boards. Advises the services on, one, the quality of their own internal, intramural S&T work, and also does studies for the most senior leadership in the Department of Defense, studies on important questions. One study that's going on now is trying to answer the question, how important is quantum information theory to the Air Force and what we should do about it? That's a study going on right now. Well, these studies are populated not by federal employees, but by academics, by technical staff from FFRDCs, and technologists from industry. Those are the members of the Scientific Advisory Board. When I worked at SAIC, I was a member of the SAB. Did a bunch of studies. These studies are critically important. Well, how frequently does UNM offer staff to serve on those studies? How frequently does UNM nominate staff to serve on the Army Science Board, the Defense Science Board, the Air Force Science Board? I don't know the answer to that, but I would aspire to make that number bigger than zero. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it is now. I don't know what it should be, but it should certainly be bigger than zero. That's an opportunity, again, to quite ethically, by the way, inform the government where its investments ought to be. Who better knows than people at universities? and then structure and posture the university to take advantage of those shifting priorities. Okay? I've lulled you to a sense of complacency, or perhaps not.
Hello, I'm Tim Graham. I'm director of UNM's Institute for Medieval Studies, and I'm faculty in the history department. So my background is in the humanities, and I collaborate with colleagues in the College of Fine Arts. These are areas that don't require huge numbers of dollars, typically, to support their research. Yet it's important to us that we feel that the Office of the Vice President is invested in our success. You have a very impressive background in the sciences, which you've spoken about. But you've mentioned that UNM has this broad variety of colleges and programs. Wanted to know if you've had a chance to think a little bit about how you might support initiatives in areas outside of your own immediate expertise.
That's a great question, and I have an answer for you. So first of all, I went to a undergraduate school that did train me in the liberal arts. So I wound up being a physicist, but I love the humanities. But I'm not a professional in the humanities. So number one is I would seek input from, I know lots of people in the School of Engineering, lots of people in the science department in the College of Arts and Sciences. I don't have close contacts at this university in other areas. I need your help, so I want your help. Look, I'm already a senior guy running a research lab, okay? Why am I interested in UNM? You might ask that. One of the attractions of UNM is it's a comprehensive university. There's an excitement being in a place where, again, I love science, I love engineering, but there's an excitement being in a place that absolutely is multidisciplinary, including the arts and the humanities. So to me, this is an attractive place, quite different, some similarities, but different from where I am. So I'm not going to pretend to know anything about how to get money, for example, from the National Endowment for the Humanities. I don't know. But I will be an absolute advocate for the humanities. We would not be the university we are if it weren't for the humanities and the arts. So that's my thoughts on that.
Hi, I'm Barbara McCready. I'm faculty in the Department of Psychology and the director of the Center on Alcoholism, Substance Abuse, and Addictions. So I do human research, and I know this is different than what you've been doing, but I'm curious what your experience is with human subjects research and what you know about some of the challenges that institutional review boards face and those of us who are doing human subjects research.
That's another great question. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to surprise you. I actually know something about human testing. We do human testing in the Air Force Research Laboratory. We are guided by a document. It's Air Force, there's an Air Force instruction, AFI, Air Force instruction 40-4, you can look it up, that guides what we do. And there's actually 3 parts in my simple-minded way of thinking. There's at least 3 things we have to do. First of all, we have in my laboratory an IRB, an AFRL Institutional Review Board. So that IRB is populated, and I imagine it's got to be the same at a university, but I don't know for sure. But in my laboratory, the IRB is populated with medical professionals, with attorneys, and researchers who are not vested in whatever it is they're reviewing. Okay, that sounds fair. Now, any experimentation done with human subjects has to have a written, a documented test plan. All experiments need test plans, especially when humans are involved. And this test plan is reviewed at the AFRL level by this IRB. Then when the test is done, so the third part is when the test is done, there are medical professionals present for the test. And the kind of medical professionals depends on the likelihood for there to be physical or psychological injury. Now, we don't ever want there to be either of those, but it's all about quantifying and mitigating risk, right? So we want to ensure that we have the right staff on site, medical staff on site, to ensure the health of the human subjects that we're testing. So we do tests that are in the physical domain and in the psychological domain. So actually, I know a little. That's almost everything I know, but I know a little bit about this, and it's a very sensitive area, and it's really important that we do it right. So in my lab, I think we do it right. Okay. Anything else? We have more time.
Hi, I'm John McGraw. I'm a professor of physics and astronomy, and I've had a little bit of experience along the lines you're discussing just now. And this has been rather comprehensive, but there are sort of two cultural aspects. One of which is that the university is operated by its own board of regents.
Yes.
The other is that we have a state legislature that I think is interested in the output of research, and both of these groups require, I think, some contact with OVPR. Mm-hmm. Have you given any thought to these sort of distinct cultures that you don't currently have in your hierarchy?
Good question, and a fair question. Yeah, so I've said a few times today that I'm embedded in a big bureaucracy, bigger than yours, okay? But it's a different kind of bureaucracy. So the Department of Defense is a huge thing. And there are political pressures in the Department of Defense. I mean, the Department of Defense budget is determined by Congress, and Congress listens to voters. So it's not that dissimilar to in our state. So, we elect state legislatures, a governor, and we have this governor appoints a Board of Regents. I think there's 7 members of the UNM Board of Regents. Now, an interesting thing is that this state chooses not to have sort of an overarching Board of Regents, right, for the entire university system. So UNM has its Board of Regents, and I guess the other universities have their own Boards of Regents. That in itself, I think is a challenge, but that's the way it is. I'm not going to pretend that as the Vice President of Research, I'm going to change any of that. I think that's, those are the cards we've been dealt, and we have to deal with it. I'm glad that you said that that you detect an appreciation for research at a research university who's got we have a multi-mission here. It's to educate our children and to do research. These are not, we know as a university, these are not diametrically opposed, but there will be people in the legislature who don't necessarily understand that. So I'm not going to pretend that I know the relationship between this university and the Office of the VPR and the state legislature and the Board of Regents. I don't know. But it needs to be, attention needs to be paid for it. We're an educational institution. We ought to be educating the Board of Regents, and now the Board of Regents probably sometimes might not want to be educated, but we ought to figure out a way, without being overt about it, to educate them, to make sure they understand the ramifications of the decisions that they make. It's my view, and I bet you all share this view, that a robust research enterprise makes for a better university, which is better for the children, which is better for everybody. So how do we make the convincing argument to the Board of Regents and the state legislatures? Well, the OVPR and other senior leaders of the university need to have a constructive dialogue on how to do that and agree on how to engage at those levels. I can't imagine that the Vice President of Research doesn't have an important role in that, but it can't be done unilaterally. It's got to be done in concert with other senior leaders, including the President of the university. So those are my initial thoughts about that. And again, when I join you in a few months, I'd be delighted to hear more of your thoughts on this, because I think that really is a key challenge that we have, and a responsibility we have.
Okay, join me in thanking Dr. Peterkin. And just a reminder that you can fill out your feedback form on vprsearch.unm.edu, and the search committee will have their meeting right after this. Thanks for coming.
Absolutely. Thank you.